Hello and welcome to the Dragonlance podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Shivam Butt, and with me today is my co-host, Jonathan Howard. And today we are going to be talking about Chapter 2 of Dragons of Autumn Twilight, the first book of the Dragonlance saga. And this is a very pivotal and important chapter. I realize it's only the beginning, but in the earliest chapters of the book, we are setting up the world and setting up the characters that are going to be going with us for the next 6, 12, 200 books. So this is a pretty big scene. Hey, John, how's it going?
I'm doing well. And to remind everyone where we are so far, we've been introduced to the world, we've been introduced to the town of Solace, and we've met 3 of our heroes so far, Tanis, Flint, and Tasselhoff. And they had an encounter with some goblins that was unexpected. They met a hobgoblin, is that right? He's a hobgoblin.
Yep.
Toad.
Good old Lord Toad. I'm sorry, at this point, he's still just Few Master Toad.
Yeah, he's Few Master Toad. They're a little troubled by the results. They've been away from town for a couple of years. They're coming back. Things aren't looking good. So after their encounter, they're rushing into Solace. And that's where we pick up here in Chapter 2.
Yeah, I mean, this is a fundamental scene because it introduces one of the most pivotal places in the entire series, the Inn of the Last Home. The Inn of the Last Home, of course, being a bar that is in Solace. Solace having all of its buildings in these gigantic Valenwood trees. So all of these buildings are located inside of the tree, sort of like magical tree houses that you have to climb up from the ground to get around. And they have bridges swinging between the trees that you can then go back and forth over. One of the things that was extra canonical, not in this book, but like when we were talking about the inn in other sources, it's listed that the floor is made out of one solid piece of stone that was hauled down from the mountains nearby to put into the bottom of the inn. At the base of the inn, there's a spring that's coming up out of the Valenwood tree that they use to brew the beer and ale that goes in here. They have a hatchway for the trash that goes out the back, and that's actually going to be important later on. But this inn is a very small inn. It's not like a hotel. There's like maybe 1 or 2 rooms that you can stay in. For the most part, it's a big open common room shaped sort of like an L. And there's a bar on one side made out of living wood, a bunch of stained glass windows there that allow like different light to kind of shine through and filter through the leaves there. And it's this warm kind of welcoming tavern. It's like the local pub for this town. And it's a very big, and like just every novel ends up coming back here for some reason.
Well, and I like the way the chapter starts where it says, nearly everyone in Solace managed to drop into the Inn of the Last Home sometime during the evening hours these days. People felt safer in crowds. And so, I mean, it tells us 2 things. This is, like you said, it's the common tavern. Everyone in town comes here. It's a meeting place, but also highlighting for us that things aren't normal here. Things are not okay. People feel safer in crowds, right? And where better to be than the old Cheer song where everybody knows your name, right?
Exactly. As we remember from the prologue, there was an old man who walks into the door who is setting up for a party that he's planning to have today. And so the inn is crowded this night with basically most of the town is there. So Tanis and his buddies walk up the stairs, go inside, and the first thing they notice is that everybody there is looking at these 3 folks, the half-elf, the dwarf, and the kender, with like suspicion. Not with the welcoming looks that they would have given them like 5 years ago before they left, because they were just well-known locals then. But now they've come back. Tanis has a big shaggy beard. Flint is any dwarf you've ever seen, and nobody really likes to see Kender anywhere. So suddenly, this is not the homecoming that these guys thought they were going to be getting.
It's kind of scary. Like, they haven't been gone that long.
Yeah.
And the fact that no one recognizes them, or worse, is that people do recognize them, but they don't want to say, "Oh, Tanis, oh, Flint, it's so good to see you." I have to imagine that if you knew Tasselhoff long enough, you'd come to like him and you would be welcoming to him. You would just know how they were. But yeah, everyone is either new, which is disturbing because there's been a huge turnover in town, or they're afraid, right? Which is also worrying.
We get some interesting details here. Like Tanis is sitting there looking there and he's like, never in the 50 years he had lived in Solace had he felt such tension. So first off, we were given a handful of information there. First, Tanis, being a half-elf, is old. But at this point, he's like about 130 years old, give or take a few. And so we know from D&D, elves live for hundreds and hundreds of years. Half-elves live for about 200 years, 200 to 300 years. But living in one town for 50 years is a long time. That is a long time to live in a place. And at that point, in the lifespan of a human, if somebody is living in a town for 50 years, you're going to know them, right? Like, especially in a town this small, everybody's going to know each other. So Tanis is sitting there going, wait, I've lived here for longer than most of these people have been alive. I've only been gone for 5 years, and I came back and suddenly everything is weird. Corruption of the Seekers that we talked about before must be coming true. The story kind of goes forth and explains who these Seekers are, which is, so as we remember, this is Dragonlance, where 300 or 400, about 350 years before present, the king priest of Ishtar, who is basically the equivalent of the Catholic Pope, who is leading the main religion there, calls upon the gods to give him a ton of power. The gods say, hey, you know what's better than giving you a lot of power? Throwing a rock at you. And so they throw a gigantic meteor at the town of Ishtar, blow it up, shatter the world, take away their power. There's a lot of reasons why this happened that we'll go into over the course of the series.
Secret reason is Mormonism.
But yeah, right? And so, like, we blow up the world, the gods are gone. So suddenly there's a world with no healing, with no medicine, with no light or any kind of divine favor. Over the course of time, groups of people will come and try to find religious faith or help or support or structure, and they will create a fake religion, build it up, it'll die off, create another one. Every couple of years, there's a new cycle. And so in story, 5 years ago, this group of people from Haven, which is one of the big towns near Solace is in this kind of region called Abyssinia, which is like not a country, but just area with cities in it. And Haven is like the biggest city there. And so this group of like clerics, I say in air quotes, call themselves the Seekers, who are like, we are going to find the new gods. And they've created a whole kind of fake pantheon and built a pseudo-theocracy of like kind of this council of leadership.
Do the new Seekers ever mention their gods, or even though they've built it up, like, aren't they still trying to find them? Like, isn't that like,
yeah,
they haven't found them? They never, I don't recall. They never say like, oh, we found the new god, Belfour.
They kind of, not in this book, but for instance, in the Soul Forge, which is the history of Raistlin that comes up afterwards, we actually go to Haven and meet the Seekers and see some of their rituals and the gods and stuff. They're looking around for gods. They were seeking them. They've created gods and say, look, we have found a god and stuff. And they kind of built up this cult bureaucracy. Uh-huh. And what they're doing is more than really anything, they're giving order to the citizens, giving like kind of some semblance of like a hierarchy that they can deal with and handle, which in a time of uncertainty is a big thing. People will glom to any kind of authority when they don't have anything. So the Seekers are able to kind of just sweep through Abyssinia and take over in all these towns where they're just as devoid of organization. And basically, like as the book says, the clerics had been honest and sincere, but then kind of misguided. And since founding, they gained more and more status as their religion flourished, and soon they became not so much concerned with the glory in the afterlife as much as power on Krynn. So they took over the governing of towns with the people's blessings. So basically, these guys come in, set up their bureaucracy, give people hope and structure, and the people say, all right, you know what? You guys seem to know what's going on. You can take over.
And tithing.
Yeah. And take over here. We'll give you some gold and you can handle all the business. This is kind of the atmosphere that is pervading Solace right now.
And the town seems to be under heavy guard, though they don't see any other goblins.
Yeah. And so basically what happens is that these guys walk into the inn, the three of them, and they're like, well, where are our friends? We better find somebody. But, weird things have happened, so maybe we won't. They get inside, and the first thing they see is a wave of noise, light, and heat, and the familiar smell of Odic's spicy potatoes hitting them in the face. Spicy potatoes, of course, is just home fries. In the Leaves from the Inn of the Last Home, there was a recipe that the original people did, which is like potatoes with like cayenne pepper and salt and stuff. And then in later versions, there were fan-made versions that came in. I remember as part of the Dragonlance forums, I performed in a contest to judge people's versions of potatoes, and I made a whole lot of different types of fried potatoes. But it's just one of those kind of like pieces of lore that has just stuck with this series for the entire existence. Odic spicy potatoes are like one of the most famous just random food items in D&D.
Yeah, and I guess it's a big deal when this was written when people ate bland food.
I like it when authors do this. I love these kind of small details that give life and roundness to a world. And in Dragonlance especially, we're early on, we're reading these novels, and you're just given this kind of like, oh, there's a named food item that these guys are famous for, it gives you more grounding. It doesn't just make it like, oh, there's like weird elves and goblins and things, but it's also the dude's known for his home fries. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, when characters in books eat, I think it does a really good job of making it seem more real, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't just seem that they're action scenes and delivering exposition. Like, oh, these are real people. They're eating food. This is a real world. People live here. That's also true of sometimes described, right? Like, it doesn't matter that there's a stone floor in this. That's not part of the story, right? The trapdoor is, the fountain is, the living wood. Like, all that stuff is not really necessary to tell the story, but it does make it feel more real.
Yeah. One of my favorite scenes in Legends, which is like 4 books from now or something, Raistlin and Caramon are off camping in the woods, and they're talking about the time that they were in an inn, and the innkeeper's beans were awful, and he didn't know how to cook it all, so Raistlin takes his magic pouch of herbs and gives the dude some marjoram to put in there, and it just becomes this like, bonding scene between these two brothers. But it's also just this character detail of the world of like, oh, here's a thing they eat in here. And it's just cool. I love it because it just makes it feel real. It gives it like a hominess. It gives it a vitality. One of the things that Weiss and Hickman do so well, especially early on, is they make Krynn feel living. They make this place feel like it's got actual texture. Because so many of these early fantasy books were just really, really bland when it comes to just setting details. They were so focused on the fights and like the big swords and the magic spells that they forgot the actual parts of like, what is the warmth of wood? Or what is it feel like for Flint to sit there and just shaving, whittling away a little sparrow out of a block of wood? It's those details that I think make Dragonlance just thrive and live so vibrantly.
Yeah, I think a lot of that early stuff is like impressionistic painting.
Mm.
There's movement and you get a feel, but it's not real. It's not a realistic painting, right? Like where there are some paintings, a Monet is impressionistic and you get the feeling for flowers, but you can't see a flower. And then there are other paintings where you can see every petal on the flower and you can see the dew on the flower and you can see the tiny bug on the flower. And it's just, they're both beautiful, but it's a different way of telling a story. And it puts focuses on different things. And I like in my fantasy and my sci-fi feel a little more real than impressionistic.
Yeah. So Tasselhoff searches through the crowd looking to see his friends, and he sees that something else hasn't changed besides the inn itself. It's that there's a firelight gleaming off of a brightly polished winged dragon helm. Who is it? Asked Flint, straining to see. Caramon, Tanis replied. Then Raistlin will be here too, said Flint, without a great deal of warmth in his voice. And now we find the true heart of Dragonlance. The two most important characters that are like the actual, like if you ask Margaret Weiss who the heart and soul of the entire series is, it is the relationship between Caramon and Raistlin Majir.
Spoilers for people who have never read. Shivam just gave it away, but I was surprised that this became the case. I can remember reading the first 3 books and then going to the next 3 and being like, wait a second, where's Tanis?
Right?
I thought Tanis was the character that we were going to be following. Why are we following these two?
Yeah, and it turns out that Raistlin... So let's actually first explain what we're talking about here, because this is one of those really important scenes. Caramon is this big, giant bear of a man who lifts up Tasselhoff in a bear hug. Taz disappears in this like big squishy hug in this giant guy. And so you're looking at this man who's effectively like, 6'5".
He's Conan, right? Caramon is Conan, basically.
Yeah, basically he's like the Conan character. He's
got a little more armor, but the role he plays is he's the barbarian, right? He's the fighter.
He's the hit things hard guy. His job is to stand in front, take the hits, and just crunch people. For instance, you see here, the table where Caramon was sitting was shoved back against a tree trunk, but the thought was crushed out of him, for it was Tanis' turn to receive the big warrior's affectionate greeting. He hastily removed the longbow and quiver of arrows from his back before Caramon hugged them into kindling. We are given a sense that this guy is gigantic. And he is. He's huge. He's 6 feet tall. He's taller than 6 feet tall. He's like 6.5 feet tall. He's broad-shouldered, broad-chested. You're archetypal D&D fighter. But then Tanis is like, well, where's Raistlin? The twins were never far apart. So now we know that Caramon isn't just a solo guy. He's got a twin brother. And Caramon's like, there. He nodded towards the end of the table. Then he frowned. He's changed, the warrior warned Tanis. The half-elf looked into the corner formed by the irregularity of the value tree. The corner was shrouded in shadow, and for a moment he couldn't see anything after the glare of the firelight. Then he saw a slight figure huddled in red robes, even in the heat of the nearby fire. The figure had a hood over his face. Suddenly, you're like, oh, wait, his twin brother is thin, is sickly, he's sitting by the fire, has a full robe on that's bright red. We haven't been introduced to mages in this book yet, but red by itself is already like just, it's a very off-putting and bright color. It's not the thing you expect for a robe, right? And suddenly, so Tanis moves over and he's like, hey, Raistlin? And the robe figure looks up. Tanis, the man whispered as he slowly pulled the hood off his head. The half-elf sucked in his breath and fell back a pace. He stared in horror.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love this scene so much.
It's interesting that the first thing we're told about Raistlin is he's changed.
Yeah.
We don't know what he was like before.
Nope.
But we know he's very different now. The reason Tanis pulled back in horror, it's described, his face in the book is literally described as hideous as out of a nightmare.
Yeah, let me read this paragraph because this is a really good one. The face that turned towards him from the shadows was a face out of a nightmare. Changed, Caramon had said. Tanis shuddered. Changed wasn't a word. The mage's white skin had turned a golden color. It glistened in the firelight with a faintly metallic quality, looking like a gruesome mask. The flesh had melted from the face, leaving cheekbones outlined in dreadful shadows. The lips were pulled tight in a dark straight line, but it was a man's eyes that arrested Tanis and held him pinned in their terrible gaze. For the eyes were no longer the eyes of any living human being that Tanis had ever seen. The black pupils were now in the shape of hourglasses. The pale blue irises Tanis remembered now glittered gold. I see my appearance startles you, Raistlin whispered. There was a faint suggestion of a smile on his lips. Oh my God.
You know, the Raistlin loves, every time he pulls this robe back, he loves the reaction he gets out of people.
Oh yeah.
It's so edgelordy, right? Like,
oh my God. Raistlin knows he is like creepy and weird, and he revels in it.
Yeah, he loves it.
But just this whole scene, like this whole face, first off, we're met by a giant, jovial, happy to see you guy who's a big warrior, hugs you, crushes your stuff in the kid. Like, and then you meet his brother who's a thin horror, whose face is melted, who is coated in some weird gold skin. I mean, we learn later what these skins are, but hourglass eyes? Hourglass eyes is completely wild and weird.
They don't spend a lot of time, but they say, like, you know, what happened to you? And he says, oh, it's a test from my order. We learn he's a sorcerer. Something clearly went very wrong. Caramon says, like, oh, I had to save him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember them ever really going into really a lot of detail about what happened. That must come later, right?
This is actually interesting. Let me talk about Raistlin and Caramon for a second, because these are in this trilogy, in the Chronicles, they're not the main focus. But if you look at the entire history of Dragonlance, the entire history of Dragonlance pivots around the family of Raistlin and Caramon. So they're worth spending a few minutes here to talk about. Their original names, when they were in the testing, when Margaret and Tracy were writing these books and writing these modules and playing through them, the characters were given the names Wasted Man and Caring Man, because it was meant to be initially a codependent relationship of these twins, one who is a born fighter, the other who's like the young weakling who's completely like crushed and like, you know, made fun of for being just a puny twerp next to his big jovial brother. And you're immediately given this relationship between these two. One is that Caramon's not very smart, but he's loving, he's kind, he's gentle, and he takes care of his brother a lot.
He's loyal.
Raistlin hates it.
Yeah.
Raistlin is like, wants to be a self-made independent person, but because of his medical conditions and his magical conditions, he is unable to take care of himself properly. So he's like always bitter and angry and just full of frustration and pent-up rage. He is literally toxic masculinity right there. He's like the beta who wishes he was the alpha, and his brother is the alpha who doesn't know any better, and is just he thinks he's trying to help his brother. His brother thinks he's being condescending and patronizing. And that's kind of this dynamic that runs between them that is just insanely powerful.
This made me think that Caramon's a Chad.
It's exactly it. Caramon is exactly that archetypal Chad character. He's a big lovable doofus. He's the himbo, right? Like, and Raistlin is like the too cool for school edgelord.
Yeah,
and
the emo goth kid.
Oh yeah, he's like the gothiest goth who's ever been, because like his whole motivation is, I'm going to show these people that I was never weak and that they were, and I have the power, and I'm going to destroy all you. And let me tell you, every 13-year-old kid who ever read that looked at that and said, I feel you, Raistlin. You're my boy. That's why he became instantly one of the most popular characters in D&D history, one of the most popular characters in fantasy. Raistlin is just this absolutely iconic, like, monument of a character. What's wild is that when you look at this paragraph that introduces him shows him as basically a wraith-like horror. He is messed up. But when you look at all the artwork, his artwork shows him like a golden god. He's like beautiful, smooth-skinned face, gorgeous-looking features, long, flowing white hair that makes him look like a Bishonen, straight out of Japanese anime. His shoulders are broad, his chest is wide, and you're like, this guy is described as having like tuberculosis, but he sure looks like he could bend somebody over and break them in half.
He's like George Gordon, Lord Byron, right? Like,
yeah,
coughing, dying of tuberculosis, but damn, he's sexy while he does it.
That's exactly it. He is like the stupid, sexy Raistlin. He's just like absurdly beautiful and just messed up. But he got hourglass eyes because Larry Elmore, when they were drawing the original artwork for this, said, you know what would be cool? If he had hourglass eyes. And so they made a gold hourglass eyes, and they're like, what does that mean? What does it mean to have gold skin and hourglass eyes?
They had to come up with that later. They had to come up with a reason for it.
Well, no, they were basically like in the design of the setting. They're like, that's a cool hook. Okay, well, what could it mean to have hourglass shaped eyes? Well, on the next page, Margaret tells us what that means. We find out that Raistlin, like John was saying, took the test of high sorcery, selected by Parsalian, who we were told is the head of the Order of Mages. So Raistlin goes to this place called the Tower of High Sorcery. Now, you were asking, where did we learn about this? I was going to tell you that before the Dragonlance novels came out, in Dragon magazine in 1984, Margaret and Tracy put out a short story to entice people into finding out about Dragonlance. And this short story was called The Test of the Twins.
Oh.
It was the first introduction to DL that anybody had. It was the journey of Caramon and Raistlin to the Tower of Waerith to take his test. That is kind of like, if you were in the know, you would have gotten this kind of like link inwards. They later reprinted it in the first short story collection, The Magic of Kryn. In the book, you get the kind of capsule information, which is all you really need, which is that like Raistlin went to the secret place, passed the test, and nearly died. And then Caramon is like, it was awful. I found him in that horrible place, blood flowing from his mouth, dying. And Raistlin's like, stop talking. You don't get to tell anybody because it's a secret. And when he awoke, my skin had turned this color, a mark of my suffering. My body and health are irretrievably shattered, and my eyes, I see through hourglass pupils, and therefore I see time as it affects all things. Even as I look at you now, Tanis, the mage whispered, I see you dying slowly by inches, and so I see every living thing. That is so cool!
Don't we meet other members of his order later on?
Yes.
But none of them are gold-skinned, and none of them ever have...
No, because we're told that the test of high sorcery, so out of character, the way this works is that in Dragonlance, and we'll learn this as we go along, there are Dragonlance has 3 moons.
3 orders of magic, right?
Yeah, there are 3 moons. There's a white moon called Solinari, the red moon Lunitari, and the black moon Nuitari. They're the 3 gods of magic. The white one is good, red is neutral, and black is evil. And so each of those 3 gods has an order of mages that goes with them that wear the robes of the color of the moon. So the white robed wizards are the good wizards. The red robed wizards, as in Raistlin right now, are the neutral wizards. And the black robes are the evil wizards. This balance of good, neutral, and evil is like one of the core themes of Dragonlance, and we'll be talking about it a lot as we go along.
It's a pretty core theme of D&D too, right?
Yeah, well, it's one of the, it's like, lawful, neutral, and chaotic. It is one of the core themes of D&D. I thought it was a really cool way to take this alignment structure and give it a different way to be looked at. But to become a test, so in D&D, at the first 3 or 4 levels, you're just a wizard, and then you go to the tower, you take the test, and become a member of one of the robed orders. The test is different for every mage, and every one of them comes out with some kind of disability or negative impacting thing. Raistlin got jacked really bad with the skin and eye stuff. We meet later on the head of the red robes, a dude named Justarius, and he's got this limp because before he took the test, he was an up-and-coming sportsman, like, the captain of the football team type of guy. And they're like, you need to make a choice between your magic and your sportsiness. And he's like, well, I'm going to take the magic. And they're like, we're going to, make your leg limpy so that you can't play sports anymore. So it's basically like, he had a knee injury and now he has to be a mage all the time. So each of these wizards has a kind of a different kind of like test to them.
Okay.
It would be weird if everybody had golden eyes, then I think it wouldn't be a trippy thing, would it? It would just like, oh, there's Jim with the gold eyes again.
The magic gods didn't go away, or they're not really gods, they're moons, or is that never explained?
So what it is that in Dragonlance there are 21 gods. I'm not going to go over the entire pantheon right now because that'll handle itself later, but it's important for the story. There's the good pantheon, which is led by the Platinum Dragon Paladine, the evil pantheon, which is led by the five-headed chromatic dragon Takesis, and the neutral pantheon led by Gillian. They have 6 other gods in their pantheon that do other things, and each of the pantheons has one of their children, which are the moon gods. And the moon gods are gods, but early on in the history of the setting, they decide that they don't want to be locked away in heaven with the other deities. They want to be closer to Earth, and they give their powers to the people to bring magic to Kryn. And as part of that, they're punished to become moons and just hover around the planet. And so the moon powers, when the gods went away, moons stayed, so their powers didn't go away, which is why the magic still works. So we have arcane magic, which is like, fireballs and teleportation and like lightning bolts and things like wizardry. And then we have divine magic, which is I pray for your health and to charm you and this stuff. Divine magic doesn't work. Arcane magic does, but nobody trusts them because you don't trust crazy, colorful robed mages who can blow you away with a word. That seems like somebody you wouldn't want to hang out with. So magic users are basically
mixing elements, and he's got pouches. This isn't like wave a wand and.
I mean, he's got wands and stuff too, but it's the function of D&D magic, which is each spell's got a verbal component. You say some nonsense, and then you move your hands in the somatic component, and then you use some material goods for the material component of your spells. For instance, to cast Fireball, you need to have a small lump of bat guano to represent the sulfur that you roll into a ball and throw, and it explodes into the fireball. These seekers, for instance, that were there before, they would find these wizards and burn them at the stake as heretics because these are showing arcane powers that are against the gods. So like mages are persecuted and hated all over the place, but you can't get rid of them because they can just look at you and dissolve you. So
they might be weak by themselves, but like they can't attack the order, right? Because that's where all of them are. And it's just, a bastion of strength.
Yeah, exactly. And plus, getting to the towers is hard enough because they're all surrounded by groves that make them impossible to approach or make the tower disappear or fill you with horror, etc. But one of the trippy things that never really explained is this whole thing about Raistlin looking at living things and seeing them die. Like, that's just a really cool effect that you hear about. But a lot of authors are like, I don't know what that means, so we're just going to move on. But like, he looks at people and he sees their skin flaking away or sees them dissolving into bone. It's got to be really disconcerting to just sit inside Raistlin's head and be looking at like food and watching that apple you're about to bite into just kind of fall away into ashy chunks. Look at your friends and be like, can you give me my pack with the hand that just fell off and dissolved? And it only comes up when they remember.
There's a couple parts where I think it's in the future it's used to good effect, right? Where he sees someone and he's like, oh, like time's not touching you, right? Like,
yeah.
Or when he meets deities, I think at some point,
yeah,
he knows because.
So in one of the earlier books, Brothers in Arms, where we learn about Raistlin and Caramon's past as like when they were in the mercenary armies together, he sees a guy who is a red dragon that is pretending to be a human, but because of the illusion over him, Raistlin sees like, oh, I can see this dragon face superimposed over this guy. I don't understand what's going on. That's super weird. But yeah, so he can use these eyes and they do it to effect, but mainly it's used to just make him even more bitter and angry.
Yeah, extra creepy.
He's like, look at all you young idiots. And I'm just creepy old goth guy who sees things dying. But then Tanis is like, was that worth it? And Raistlin leans forward and he's like, I've got power now. Parsalian told me the day would come where my strength would shape the world. I have power and the staff of Magius. And this is the most important like MacGuffin item in the entire series. It is one of the most powerful magic items in D&D. It is a plain wooden staff with a ball of bright crystal clutched in a disembodied golden claw carved to resemble a talon of a dragon. This is basically this incredible staff In the series, all we're really shown is that he uses it to make light. Like, he goes, Shirok, and the light turns on. And I'm like, okay, well, it does more than just that, but it's really just like absurdly powerful.
It's so they don't have to carry torches into every dungeon, basically.
Yeah, it helps. I mean, like, you could be a speedrunner and have to memorize the layout, or you can just carry a staff that like snaps on and snaps off whenever you want. To be fair, that's a super useful ability for dungeon crawlers. Later on, we find out that Magius himself was one of the greatest mages of all time, who is a companion of the knight Huma, who we'll find out about later.
Yeah.
Raistlin is here. Caramon is here. Flint and Tanis and Tasselhoff are looking like, okay, well, that's weird. You know, I could really use a beer. Where's that barmaid at? Caramon's like, all right, Tanis, guess who this is? If you win, I'll buy this round. Please let me think about anything other than Raistlin's melty face. So they stare at this woman. They're like, I have no idea. But to elves, humans seem to change so rapidly that we lose track. I'm like 102, but I look 30. And to me, those 100 years were basically like 30 years to me anyway. So this young woman must have been like a baby when I left. And she's like, I was 14. And Caramon used to say I was so ugly my father would have to pay someone to marry me. Flint is like, Tika! And he's like, you're buying, you great oaf. And it's like, well, now we meet Tika Whalen, the ward of Odic, who lives here in the inn, who is basically her father's and mother died a long time ago. The party is sort of complete at this point, almost, except for one person.
Yeah. Tika gives a message.
Yeah.
He asks her, and she says, oh, I have a message from you. It's from Kitiara. She's not going to make it. And Tanis is upset by this, and Flint says a thing. The oath that they all took when they left here 5 years ago was to go out and look and then come back and report. And one person didn't. Tanis is upset about it.
Yeah, it's from Kitiara. It's his voice sounding strained and unnatural. She's not coming. There was a moment's silence. That's done it, Flint said. The circle is broken. The oath denied. Bad luck. He shook his head. Bad luck. And that ends the chapter right there. We don't know who Kitiara is or what their relationship is, except that she is a part of this circle, and she has decided not to show up.
And she left a message for Tanis.
Yeah, she left a message for Tanis, though, so that's definitely a thing.
And if we roll right into chapter 3, we're immediately told who she is.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, you know, it's a good place. It's like a nice little kind of chapter end there. That's a really good chapter, though, because it's just, you find out, it sets up the world, it sets up this party, and it sets up that there's one of them who is not here. So at the beginning of chapter 3, Knights of Solamnia, the old man's party, Raistlin leans forward. Him and Caramon look at each other. And this is the only time that you see them kind of really emphasize that they're twins, because Kitiara is their older half-sister. Half-sister, right? Like, they shared the same mother, but her father was a different man than theirs. So Kitiara wouldn't break her oath unless another stronger oath bound her, said Raistlin. And so Tanis sits and reads a note, and he says, her duties with their new lord keep her busy. She sent her regrets and her best wishes to all of us, and her love to her brothers, and that's it. And Tasselhoff is like, love to who? Flint basically steps on his foot, and he's like, oh, because they see Tanis blush, and so now we know that Kit and Tanis have had a thing, and Kitiara is not here anymore, and Tanis is sad about it.
Yeah, they say she's a mercenary.
Yeah.
And I thought this was interesting because, like, if you're on a quest, it seems odd to take on odd jobs while you're in the middle of your quest.
Well, I mean, they're on 5 years of leave from each other, right? So she's basically, what they did was they decided 5 years ago, we're going to go and explore and find the new, like, Tanis was like, I'm going to go see if I can find the new gods. Tasselhoff's like, I'm just going to go on my Wanderlust quest because I'm a Kender. Flint is like, I'm going to go see what's up with the dwarves. Sturm, we haven't met Sturm yet, but Kitiara and Sturm decide they're going to go back to Solamnia to, oh yeah, we find this out right now because, like,
Sturm is introduced.
Raistlin shrugs his shoulders and he's like, we don't know what her lord is, but the last time we saw her, she was going north with Sturm, north to Solamnia to discover if she could find anything out about her father. Because, like, look, if you're going north and it's kind of a war-torn time, you got nothing else to do. You might as well, like, join up with companies for small missions here and there, fight something, get some treasure, and go on your way to do the thing. And so Tika says that this message showed up under weird circumstances from a man who brought it in that she thinks was a man. A dude who is wrapped head to foot in clothing of every description, so much so that you couldn't even see his face, and his voice was hissing. And he spoke in a strange accent. He's like, deliver this to one Tanis half-elven. And she's like, he hasn't been here in like years, man. Man is like, he will be. And then he left. And so it's like, oh, a hissing man wrapped up in weird clothing, huh? I guess that seems odd. Where could that be?
We'll find out about that later.
Boy, will we.
And then we're introduced to Sturm.
Yeah.
He shows up in full plate armor. And it's described as like archaic. He's part of an order that was popular way before the Cataclysm. And he comes with two people. They're barbarian Plainspeople. These are Native Americans.
Boy, did Tracy really just lay it on thick here. But let's talk about Sturm before we get to the Plainsfolk, because that's a whole bucket of 1980s fish that has aged as well as fish from the 80s has. So Sturm here, a straight-backed figure dressed in full plate and chainmail, and the symbol of the Order of the Rose, that we don't know what that is necessarily, but it's on his breastplate. So it's a big, ornately carved breastplate. And everybody turns to him and scowls. This guy is a Solamnic knight, and the Knights of Solamnia had fallen to ill repute in the north. Rumors of their corruption had spread even this far south. And so everybody, even the people who recognize him, are just kind of like, he's a weirdo. Because they look at him and he's wearing full plate mail that is as like 300 years old. It is super out of style and old fashioned. Nobody wears full plate anymore. More than that, he's got gigantic, long walrus mustaches, which were the age-old symbol of the knight and as obsolete as the armor that he wore. He wore this armor in unquestioned pride. He had a sword arm, and he was just like, I am a knight. I am the son of knights, and I don't care about any of you. This is my birthright. If you want to talk about it, we can talk about it outside.
Gotta be sweating like a pig.
Oh, yeah. But you also know that he would be counting each drop of sweat as, this is my penance for, the shame of my ancestors or whatever.
Well, and it's weird because you would not wear, ground troops don't wear full plate armor.
Yeah.
Right? Like he's not on a horse. Like this entire story, he tromps around with them walking in full plate armor, and like, that's impossible. You would die.
Yeah, like just carrying the full plate is so heavy. D&D makes a lot of liberties with armor, we'll be honest here. But walking around with full plate mail without a horse, without like any real reason to, and we learned why they're in full plate mail later, it has to do with the things that they were riding and the things that they were carrying.
Yeah.
But it turns out that Sturm is just old fashioned, and he's like, he was raised by exiled knights, and he has basically been raised to value his old country and his people and his order more than anything. And it's the only identity he had to cling to because his family were refugees. They had to run away from Solamnia, the kingdom of their birth, and come here to Solace and live as like poor common folk, even though there were nobles up in Solamnia. And so he's just sitting there like, this is all I have, right?
He just has the armor, his birthright. That's all that's left of it is the armor.
Yeah.
And he talks, doesn't he talk in these and thous? Am I misremembering that?
He more or less, not in writing, they don't say that, but they definitely give him like a very formal and stiff way of speaking. He's definitely a stuffy old man. He's barely 30.
Yeah, he's younger than...
He's barely 30, but he's like 60 before he was, 30. He's got a little bit of gray in his brown hair. His mustaches are there, but he definitely acts like an old man, like an old and like conservative, stuffy old man. And there are these two plainsmen with him. Now, plainsmen, they're wearing the dress of the Quishu, the tribe that we're told lives out there. These are a little weird here because plainsfolk are effectively, like John was saying, they're the barbarians, they're the native people.
Except they're white.
Yeah, except they're white. Well,
white and delightsome, perhaps.
So let's go and look and see what they say about these two barbarians here. Yeah, because Sturm sits and talks about, his father and his trip with Kitiara, and Tanis gets all like woolly-eyed about Kit.
And he got his armor and the sword.
Yes.
He got those things. He doesn't know who the Plainspeople are. He just met them outside of town. He doesn't know where Kitiara is. Tanis talks a bit about them being star-crossed lovers and
Yeah, it's like
interspecies love never works.
wild, impetuous, hot-tempered. The swordswoman was everything Tanis was not. She was also human, and love between human and elves always ended in tragedy. Even though he's a half-elf, and he's the result of love between human and elf. And so, yeah, he's definitely got this whole, like, he's gaga over this chick. But yeah, so Sturm comes here, and he's got his fancy armor. He's got his two-handed, epic old sword. And
again, a sword you would not use on the ground.
Yeah. And he's like, this sword will only break if I do. And it was my father's and his father's and his father's, et cetera, et cetera. And then Tasslehoff's like, okay, that's boring. Let's talk about these two barbarians that showed up. And the man was the tallest man Tanis had ever seen. Caramon at 6 feet would only come to this man's shoulder. And we already know that Caramon's a giant, right? Like he's a giant epic guy. We're told that Caramon's chest is about twice as big around, his arms 3 times as big. So this dude is a really tall, thin, emaciated kind of like person who's basically either been sick or suffered. His face was okay, and this is where they get a little weird. His face, though dark skinned, had the pale cast of one who has been ill or suffered greatly. His companion, the woman Sturm had vowed to, was so muffled in a fur-trimmed cape and hood that it was difficult to tell much about her. She carried a plain strap trimmed with feathers in a barbaric fashion.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh God, guys. Like, first off, I mean, we see from the artwork of the cover and like things that she's obviously like a Native American type in like, you know, tooled leather and fur and everything like that.
She's wearing buckskin. He's wearing buckskin.
Yeah, exactly. All of the kind of tropes of like old timey Native American like cowboys and Indians type of things. And Sturm's like, yeah, I found them wandering outside. They were exhausted and like sick, and so I brought them in here. They've got this staff, and they were like, yeah, there were some goblins looking for a staff here too, but we beat them off. They look at Raistlin's staff and they're like, did they try to take yours? And they're like, yeah, if they tried, I would have killed them. The woman, though, while these guys are sitting and having a conversation, the woman throws her hood back and firelight shines on her hair. We're already told that the other guy is dark-skinned, dark-haired, and Tasslehoff, who is a Kender who's traveled all over, is like, never seen a plainsman like this, because they were usually, you know, dark-haired and kind of like brownish, reddish skin, whatever. No jeweler spinning molten strands of silver and gold could have created the effect of this woman's silver gold hair shining in the firelight. So she's blonde, basically.
Gold Moon.
Yeah. Her name is Goldmoon. And I mean, like, look, your name being Goldmoon's fine, whatever. But
what's his name?
Riverwind.
I mean, Riverwind is a little on the nose.
One of the things that's a criticism of Dragonlance, for all that I love it, it really is a period of its time and a period of its creators' times. And they treat Native Americans definitely the way that Americans treated Native Americans, as sort of this like beleaguered, backwards people. This like people who need help or who are like just like totally lost in the woods, kind of like they're very nature oriented and they're very spiritual.
We're laughing at this now, but this would not have been considered a negative this is a positive portrayal.
Yeah.
Of Native Americans at this time, right?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make it a good, accurate portrayal.
No.
But it was not.
They were treated as heroes and not as the victims or villains.
Yes. It's a little cringy now, but it wasn't intended that way. The authors were not trying to do that.
It's one of those crushing you with kindness type of things.
Yeah.
I don't want to like excuse it, but like their heart was kind of like, we're going to try to rehabilitate these. It was a little patronizing. It was a little patronizing, but at the same time, it was also like, you could tell that Tracy, when he was coming up with this, was coming from a place of sincerity of like, we want these people to be a fundamental part of the story. And they are. They're absolutely core to the story. They're never treated as like extra thoughts. They're like Goldmoon is one of the characters who lasts all the way through the end of Dragonlance. She's like one of the most important characters in the story. It's just wild though that they still made her a white chick and like descended of Solamnic knights who ran away to hide with the Quishu at the Cataclysm. And it's like, oh, really? You couldn't have just given them that? We see this woman here and she goes off listening to the old man, the old wizard that we remember from the beginning of the story, sitting there by the fire, and he's telling a story to a kid. And this kid's like, are your stories to the ancient gods true, old one? And next to them is Hedrick, the high theocrat of Solace, who's a dour, brown-robed, kind of like fat, slovenly guy.
Well, he's getting drunk, right? Like he's sitting there getting trashed.
Oh yeah, he's super drunk.
So everything you need to know about the pastor of this community
yeah,
is that like he's publicly getting trashed on a Friday night.
Yeah.
It's not a great example.
No. This seeker frowns when the old guy is telling a story about the ancient gods, and the old man turns and he's kind of like, "Indeed, my stories are true, child." And he's looking straight at the woman and the escort. "Ask these two. They carry such stories in their hearts." And the boy's like, "Do you? Can you tell me a story?" And the woman's like, "What the hell? I don't want to be in the spotlight. What's going on?" Put on the spot. And the woman is like, "Well, I'm not really a storyteller. I don't have the art." And the old man's like, "Well, you're a singer of songs, so chieftain's daughter, sing the song, Gold Moon. You know the one." So we're giving her name.
The old man just told her, 1, you sing songs. How does he know that?
2, you're the chieftain's daughter. And so out of nowhere, a lute appears in his hand, and he gave her to the woman. And she's like, "How do you know who I am?" He's like, "Yeah, it's not important. Just sing."
He's like, "I'm setting up the story here. Come on."
Yeah. And so she sings a song, which is very long, and I'm not going to sing it. It's just about her love story of Riverwind, the man who is with her. And Riverwind goes on a quest and comes back with a blue staff as bright as a glacier. And those of you who have been paying attention might notice that this blue staff has come up quite a few times already, and we're only in chapter 3. Riverwind gets this. He wants to marry Goldmoon. Goldmoon's father's like, "No, you're not marrying my daughter." And he sent her away. So he goes on a quest, comes back with the staff, and he's like, "I came back." And everybody's like, "Yeah, but you still can't marry her." And so the chieftain orders his people to stone Riverwind and get rid of him because he's obviously like speaking above his station. And then Goldmoon goes and hugs him, and they're both getting stones thrown at them. The staff flares in a blue light, and both of them vanish. And suddenly they appear over here in Solace. The Quishu people are still in Abyssinia, but they're not nearby. They're like 2 days away. And suddenly these two are...
I never got that before. This is the first time I realized that they just popped up here through magic.
Yeah, like this magical staff just teleports them, protects them. And so everybody's like, "What the hell kind of story is that?" And then the kid turns back to the old man. It's like, "Now can you tell me a story?" And he's like, "Once upon a time, the great god Paladine." And the kid's like, "I've never heard of a god called Paladine." And suddenly the drunk old high theocrat's like, "The hell are you talking about?" And the old man sits there and says, "Paladine was one of the ancient gods. Nobody has worshipped him for a long time." "Why did he leave us?" the little boy asked. "He did not leave us," the old man answered. "Men left him after the dark days of the cataclysm. They blamed the destruction of the world on the gods instead of on themselves, as they should have done." And it's like, whoa, that's a really big kind of setup right there. We're told this man who showed up here at the beginning, we knew he was Fizzban from the very beginning. And he's sitting there and he's like, "I know there's a party coming. I know who all these people are. I have obvious magical powers, and I'm talking about the ancient gods." But if you look at it from an outside of the book story, this is Mormon as heck right there. This is straight up pearl of great price,
This is Moroni.
The angel has come down and is saying, like, "We had just left the glory of the gods in the woods. We totally should go back and find it. There's a convenient Native American here who just happens to have something on hand."
It's not the golden plates, but we'll get there.
We'll get there. And so Fizzban continues, like, "Have you ever heard of the Canticle of the Dragon?" "Oh, yes," says the boy. "I love stories of dragons, but Papa says dragons never existed. I hope to see one day." And the old man is like, "Careful what you wish for, my kid." Like,
the dragons are... Oh, wait, no, that's not true. I was thinking all the dragons are evil, but we'll find out.
There are good dragons and evil dragons, but they've all been gone for thousands of years since the last Dragon War. So once upon a time, Paladine hears a prayer of a knight named Huma. Huma gets lost in a forest, and he prays to Paladine for help, and suddenly there's a white stag in front of him. This is an important detail that comes up later. Huma starts to shoot the stag, but his heart fails him. He couldn't shoot such a magnificent animal, and the stag runs away. So Huma follows it, and he follows it until it goes back to his homeland, and he offered thanks to the god Paladine. And suddenly, blasphemy, you hear from nowhere. Hedrick the Theocrat stands up, smashes his cup, and he's like, "You heretic, you're corrupting our youth. I'll bring you before the council." And he's just like stepping forward and staggering. He's like, "Call the guards, arrest all these people. They're witches. I'll take this staff." And so he lurches over, tries to grab Goldmoon's staff. And Goldmoon's like, "You can't have this. This is mine." He's like, "Witch? I'm the High Theocrat. I'll take what I want." He starts to take another grab, and the other Native American stands up and says, "The chieftain's daughter says you're not going to take this." And he shoves the seeker backwards. The Seeker was already drunk, so he didn't get pushed a lot, but because he's already wasted and off balance, he flails wildly and falls headfirst into the fire pit they're right next to. A whoosh and a flare of light, and he's already soaked in alcohol, and suddenly my dude is on fire. He had become a living torch, the book says.
Taz tries to help. The old man stops him. It's a real mess.
Oh yeah, they're like, knock him down, we can smother the fire. The old man grabs the barbarian's staff and hands it to the Kender. And the Kender's like, okay, well, you want me to swing a thing at a person? Let's do it! Taz takes the staff and with all of his strength, hits the theocrat squarely in the chest, knocks the man over, and there's a gasp. Taslov himself stands open-mouthed as the staff clutched in his hand, and he stares down at the sight of his feet. The flames instantly died. The man's robes are rebuilt amazingly, undamaged. His skin is pink and healthy, and there's a look of fear and awe on his face. Not a mark on his skin. The alcoholism is gone. The drunken bags around his eyes are gone. He is just as hale and hearty as he's ever been.
It's a miracle.
And the old man, and everybody's just like, what the hell? And the old man's like, it healed him! The staff! Look at the staff! And Taz looks at the staff in his hand, which is not this weird wooden feathered staff from Barbarians. It is a bright blue crystal staff glowing with a bright blue light.
And then the old man cries he's like, the Plainspeople and those guys, they should all be arrested.
Mm-hmm. Call the guards, arrest them. I saw them come in with the night. And Tana's like, what, are you crazy? What are you doing, old man? Call the guards. They found the staff. They'll leave us alone. And suddenly everybody in the crowd is turning on these people.
This is where it gets crazy with the...
Hedrick.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
The first time I read this, it was so cringy.
Yeah, it's just like, it's horrifying, man.
He's insane, right?
Yes.
And even though he's been cured, he says Goldmoon's a witch and he's going to burn her. And then he does this. He sticks his hand back into the fire.
Yeah.
Like he intentionally mutilates himself. Everyone sees that like it just starts melting and then he flees.
Yeah.
He runs away because he's a bad guy. And as he's running away with his melted hand, he's telling them, arrest him, arrest him.
Yeah, and he's like, you've cured me with evil. Even though I burn to purify my flesh, you will burn to purify your soul. And he's got this look of satisfaction on his pain-twisted face as he's clutching his gnarled hand. And so Tika comes out, and they're like, we got to get out of here. Quick. Grab the staff. Everything. We got to go. And Tana's like, this isn't our staff. I don't know what you're doing. And Tika's like, are you kidding? They're going to kill you, buddy. They turn around, and the entire crowd is suddenly turned on them. And they're like, oh, it's on. And suddenly the guards show up. And Tanis stands up and says the most famous sentence in the history of Dragonlance. We'll have to go out through the kitchen. They won't look back there, but it won't take them very long to surround the place because this is a very small inn at the top of a tree. They get together as a team. Caramon pulls on his hat and grabs his sword. Raistlin grabs his staff. They all get together and start running out.
It all clicks right here.
Yeah.
We see a little bit why this is a group because they all have assigned roles. It's like slipping into an old shoe that you've worn before.
Yeah. They've all adventured before together. They know how to stand with each other. They're not just, unlike a lot of these fantasy stories, these guys aren't new to combat. They know how the game is played. They're all getting ready to leave. And Sturm is just sitting there drinking his beer at the table calmly. And Tan's like, we got to leave. And Sturm's like, run from this rabble? Tan's like, yes. There's a lady to protect. And Sturm's like, oh, of course, I must protect the lady. He puts his cup down and is like, ma'am, your servant. It seems like we're in danger. Shall we head out? And so they grab everything and they bail. Out they go through the kitchen, down through the garbage chute. Goldmoon and Riverwind have a conversation in the barbarian tongue, the Quishu language. And then they're like, sure, we'll come with you. There's this little trapdoor at the back, which is a hole cut in the floor with a rope that hangs down, goes down 40 feet to the ground. And he's like, here the ale comes up and the garbage goes down. And Taslov grabs on and swings down. And so they all grab down and they just start climbing. Caramon's like, all right, Raistlin, I don't know how you're going to get down, but I can carry you on my back. And Raistlin eyes flash with anger that startled Tanis. Tanis like, wait, what? What's his anger? And Raistlin's like, I can get down myself, thank you. And before anybody else can stop him, he steps to the edge of the hole and jumps out. And everybody looks down expecting to see splatter Raistlin, and instead they just see this dude gently floating, his staff's crystal glowing brightly. It's like, oh yeah, he's a wizard. He can cast Featherfall. He can do what he wants. And so these guys all, one after another, get out of here. They run to Tika's house and try to hide.
Tanis is injured. He going down the rope. He burns his hand.
Yeah.
Goldmoon heals him, and there's a little exchange where he's like, how do you do this? And she's like, I have no idea. Like, I'm not a cleric, right? Like, she doesn't say that, but she doesn't.
No, she's like, look, man, I just got this staff, and it does weird things. And so, like, Sturm turns and looks at Tannis, and he's like, welcome home. And he's like, Tannis turns back and grins like, same to you, bud. It's like, welcome home. When Goldmoon sits and heals Tannis's hands, he's just like, true healing. Holy crap, it's real.
This is the first any of them have seen it.
Oh, yeah. That's what they went out to look for. That's what their 5-year break was for.
Even Flint is too young to...
Yeah, Flint is...
200 something.
300... And, yeah, Flint is like in his mid-2s or 3s. He's very old for a dwarf, but he is...
Post-Cataclysm. I forgot that they've only had the stories of healings, right? They've never seen it before. So now this is the first time any of them have seen it. Twice in one day.
Yeah, and suddenly it's just like, oh, weird.
They run to Tika's house. That's where they're going.
Mm-hmm.
Probably where we'll pick up
next time
on the Dragonlance podcast. Shivam, why don't you go ahead and tell people where they can find you online?
You can find me at ElectroTowel on Twitter. And John, where can they find you?
I am at False Logic on Twitter. And why don't you let them know about your other podcast?
Oh, yeah. And every Tuesday, you can come and listen to my other podcast about Magic the Gathering called Casual Magic. It's an interview show. If you're into the card game, we can sit and talk about it. But for now, as they say, may your way be green and golden, and we will see you next time on the Dragonlance podcast.
Good night.